Brenda. I'm Eric. This is John. I'm going to repeat kind of the argument real quick because there's a lot of new people here, and then we'll let you talk, okay? We give 3 minutes. Here we go. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we're here offering $1,000 for evidence against us. We say that evolution is impossible. I'll define the terms for you real quick. When we say evolution, we're not referring to microevolution, variation, speciation, or adaptation. All of that happens. We agree with it. The question is, do those small changes equal big changes? That's what we disagree with. When I use the word impossible, I'm not talking about in the realm of theoretical possibilities. I'm talking about scientifically plausible. Could it actually happen in real life? Because evolution is not scientifically plausible. That's exactly correct. It's impossible. It's not scientifically plausible. It is impossible. Within the realm of science, what we can see, test, and observe, jump in line if you'd like, what we can see, test, and observe, evolution is impossible. It doesn't happen. The mathematics that we're going through are not ours. These are simple genetic changes, and how long would it take to get the genetic changes in the human genome? So these are not our numbers. They were developed by an evolutionary geneticist. They've never been refuted. You just heard Jackson referring to a paper, still trying to answer Haldane's dilemma, because Haldane's dilemma has not been refuted. Let me go through the dilemma real quick, and then we'll have a conversation. Here's the dilemma. By the way, do we have more papers, guys? Are we out of paper? Are we out of these? Oh, hey, if you didn't get one of these sheets of paper, Danny right here has them. You can grab one of these sheets. We're going to go through these numbers. It's really simple. Step number 1. What % difference are ape-like creatures from human beings? It used to be 1%. Now it's up to 15%. Got the papers right here if you guys want them. The papers are right over here. We're going to go with a simple 1%. We're 1% different from an ape-like creature. That makes it even easier for evolution to happen. Step number 2. How many base pairs are in the human genome? Human genome has about 3 billion base pairs. Actually, they've discovered it's more than that. But we'll go with the number 3 billion. That makes it easier. Step number 3. If there's a 1% difference and 3 billion base pairs, how many base pair differences are there between an ape-like creature and a human being? The answer, 1% of 3 billion, 30 million. That's step number 3. Now you'll notice on the paper I've given you the numbers we're going with versus the real numbers. We've crossed out the real numbers to make it easier. The real number is 675 million, but we're only going to say 30 million beneficial mutations that go from an ape-like creature to a human being. Step number 4, how long would it take to get 30 million beneficial mutations? Well, when they did the study based on a population of 10,000 individuals, and they discovered it would take about 300,000 generations to go and get 1,000 beneficial mutations locked inside or fixed in a population. So the argument is actually pretty simple. How long would it take to get the mutations? About 300 generations to get a beneficial mutation fixed in the population. What was your name?
Brenda.
Brenda. Brenda, if you had a positive beneficial mutation and we needed that mutation to get fixed in the entire population, how many generations would it take? They say about 300. That was based on a population of about 10,000. We got way more than that now. You'd have to have a whole lot of kids with that beneficial mutation, and everybody else would have to die for that to get fixed in. Or, your offspring would marry with somebody, and that beneficial mutation would have to get passed on. They say 300 generations. We're going to go all the way down to 1 to make it even easier. Every generation, a beneficial mutation takes over the population. Now the only question we have to ask is, how long is a generation? How long until you have kids? Well, on average, let's say, 20, 25, 30 years? We're going to go all the way down and say 20 years. Every 20 years, you get a beneficial mutation fixed in the population. Now the math is easy. How long would it take to get 30 million? 30 million times the 20 years, it would take 600 million years to go from an ape-like creature to a human being based on simple genetics and mathematics. Very easy. According to the evolution worldview, we evolved from an ape-like ancestor named Lucy about 3.2 million years ago. That is what they would say. Lucy was one of our earliest known common ancestors, 3.2 million years ago. You would need 600 million years to go from an ape-like creature to a human. Therefore, evolution is impossible genetically and mathematically. That's the argument. Brenda, What would you like to say about that?
Can we talk about the Hickey article?
You want to talk about
Hickey
Hickeys?
and
Yeah.
Golden, yep.
Oh, Hickey and Golden. Okay. I thought you wanted to talk about Hickeys.
No.
Did somebody else give this to you? Okay.
Yeah.
Hickey and Golden.
So
What can I help? How can I help you? I'm sorry, what's your name? I didn't catch it.
Brenda.
Brenda, nice. Okay.
yeah. So it says that sexual reproduction decreases the cost of obviously handling.
You want to speak a little louder so everybody can hear you, and straight into the mic, and be confident. It's okay. Can I just explain to everybody? I'm very passionate, okay, and I speak loudly. This is probably culturally different to you guys. I come from Lebanon, all right? I had to defend for my life for 10 years in the middle of bombs, guns, and snipers. So for me, I speak with passion. I don't mean to be forceful upon you, okay? I enjoy this. I think people are passionate, probably believe what they believe strongly. So go ahead, Brenda. You speak passionately because I like it.
It says that the sexual reproduction removes the perceived reproduction constraint on the rate of adaptive reproduction.
Thank you for bringing this up. At some point, somebody's going to bring this up. They're going to bring up this article saying, well, sex solves Haldane's dilemma. And I highlighted a couple of things. I don't know if it's coming up on the screen now, so I'm going to just read those highlights. It says the reason was that Haldane's model did not include recombination. That's the first thing. And the second I've highlighted is that sexually outbreeding population is one way of creating more beneficial mutations. Here's the deal that confuses me, because I'm going to show it to you straight up there, right? So this is Haldane's article right there, and look at what it says. He used combination right there, he used combination right there, and he used combination here and in breeding with animals. In other words, he was saying sexually breeding animals will solve the problem. Well, Haldane used sexually breeding animals like vertebrates and cattle and so on. So I'm just highlighting them very quickly. Hey, listen guys, I care about you. So I'm not here to lie to you. Thank you, you blew me a kiss, I appreciate that. All I'm saying is that I am here because I want you to know the truth. I'm not making this up. So here is Haldane, who covered all the, here, look, vertebrates. He's talking about vertebrates. Here are the calculations. And I can show you that recombination has been known since 1931. I could show you the article. Ask me later if you want to see it. But here's the deal. This is what this article did. If you read this article, he referred to a number of things. He referred to sexual production mitigates cost of selection. That's what he said. The answer to that is that was a realistic amount of number he chosen. So that works in the favor of the article. When it comes to reduction of selection costs, he was partially realistic. He wasn't entirely realistic. When it comes to strong selection and high fixation probability, he was not fully realistic. Are you still paying attention, Brenda? And when it comes to the large population size and constant conditions, he was not realistic at all. All you got to do, take the article and upload it to ChatGPT, and it will compare it to consensus, today's consensus, and it tells you whether it matches. The conclusion is here, while the theoretical framework presented in Sex Solves Haldane's Dilemma is scientifically valid and helps to explain the evolutionary advantage of sexual reproduction, the conditions assumed in the paper are not fully realistic in nature. It says here, real-world populations face more complexity than the idealized models assume, such as genetic drift, small population sizes, colonial interference, and fluctuating selection pressures. Therefore, while recombination, which is his main argument, in sexual reproduction do increase the efficiency of selection and adaptation, they do not eliminate the challenges posed by Haldane's dilemma. Are you listening to this? Does not remove it entirely. In summary, some assumptions from the paper hold in nature, but others are oversimplified compared to the complex dynamics of real populations. In English, it's saying that even though he did some things right, it didn't match everything enough for it to overcome Haldane's dilemma, and it did it in bold. I don't know if you can see it on the screen, it's in bold. But let's assume he's right. Let's pretend he solved the problem. This is what he solved using unrealistic figures. But if I use realistic figures, that means I use 15% difference between an ape-like creature and a human, then this is the figure I need, 675 million base pairs. That's what I need. Look, this guy used unrealistic figures, came up with 30 million. I use realistic figures, I come up with 675 million. He did not solve the problem, he just confused everybody with the solution. All of you can do it for yourselves. So the very paper that came out literally within the last 5 years, what do we have? Haldane is right and he couldn't solve it. Haldane's problem is not resolved. Guys, I care about you. I don't know what to say. I'm using the $1,000 as a hook to get you here to talk to me because it's not been resolved. There are good scientists out there that can't solve the problem. And I want you to know the truth. And you know why? Because the truth does really matter.
Yeah. So, conclusion on that, he's using 30 million, and we're saying, he said, look, if we do it really, really fast and use this process, we can get 30 million. But the reality is, that's not realistic. We need 675 million. Even after you solve for 30 million, that's a fraction of what you actually need to solve for.
Using unrealistic figures.
So that means it's not, Haldane is still correct. Let me tell you, Brenda, why this is so important. We're here, and we set up this time, and we got this booth, because we really do, as John said, we care about people. And if evolution is a lie, if it's not true, if it's impossible, that means you're not just an animal. That means you're created in the image of God. That means you're made with purpose and with value. You're not just one of 8 billion people that has no value.
You think that God can't plan out evolution?
Let me tell you what it would be like if God used evolution. This isn't me saying it. I'll tell you from an evolutionary scientist. David Hull, an evolutionary philosopher of science, said this: the problem that biological evolution poses for natural theologians is the sort of God that Darwinian evolution implies. The evolutionary process, he's accurate here, the evolutionary process is rife with happenstance, contingency, incredible waste, death, pain, and horror. That's what the evolution worldview brings to the table. Whatever the God implied by evolutionary theory and the data of natural history may be like, he's not the Protestant God of waste not, want not. Here's his conclusion. He's not a loving God who cares about his productions. He's not even the awful God portrayed in the book of Job. The God of the Galapagos, the God of Darwinian evolution, is careless, wasteful, indifferent, almost diabolical. He's certainly not the sort of God to whom anyone would be inclined to pray. David Hull, philosopher of science, evolutionist. Yeah, philosopher. It doesn't, so based on his degree, I got to go in order, but based on his degree, it doesn't determine what he said is true or false. What he said is true, Brenda. He's saying, said philosopher of science, what he's saying is that if the God of evolution is true, that's a wicked God, and I agree.
But people say that about anything.
People say that about what?
People say, like if God is like so bad because he like lets kids have cancer.
Yeah.
Then
That's an awful thing, isn't it? Kids having cancer is terrible, isn't it? What about the rapes that have happened on this campus? That's terrible as well. I mean, no, honestly, isn't that bad? Would you say that's bad, Brenda?
What?
The rape happening on this campus
Yes.
is absolutely. Would you say that murdering children is bad?
Yes.
Absolutely. Now the question is, why do you believe that? Because honestly, Brenda, this me be honest. If we're just animals, there's no right and wrong. You don't get right and wrong from evolution. You don't get here's what's right and what's wrong based on everybody being animals. The lion doesn't kill the zebra and we take him to court and say, shame on you. It's just an animal. We are made in the image of God. Brenda, you have unbelievable value and worth. Not because you're one of 8 billion animals, because you're one of 8 billion lives a day that are made in the image of God. And if you take that away, and that's why we're doing this, if you take God away and say, I want to put evolution in there, there's no purpose, there's no worth.
Where does it say that evolution never happened in the Bible?
Well, God says He created. God spells it out very clearly. It's written in Hebrew narrative form. God says He made the animals, and He made them in their image.
According to their kind.
Genesis 1, God made the animals according to their kind. And then He made man. He put him in the garden.
But he's
and man
speaking in
sinned.
parables.
That's not a parable. Literally, if you ask a Hebrew person to read Genesis 1, they would say that's not poetic. It's written in literal Hebrew narrative, the way they would tell a story. Matter of fact, Exodus 14 and Exodus 15, you can see the difference between what a real story happened and the poem or the parable or the song that they wrote about that story that happened. And you can see how the writing is different. Hebrew experts that read Genesis say this isn't written as a poem, it's written as a narrative. It's very interesting. It really did happen. Hey, Brenda, let me ask you something. If sex doesn't solve it, because that doesn't solve the problem, and these numbers are correct, and Haldane's dilemma is still a dilemma, would that make you question evolution, macroevolution? Why not?
Because it makes no sense.
What makes no sense? No, Brenda, what you said, it makes no sense. You have to know what doesn't make sense.
But like, you're just saying that like, God just like made humans and He just put us on Earth.
I'm not talking about that argument. I'm not saying that doesn't make sense or makes sense. That's a miracle. I get it. I can't rationalize that with science. I'm saying this argument. Does this argument make sense?
So where did
There's
humans
not
come
enough
from?
time?
In your like from obviously what you're saying, we were separate from apes, right?
Say that one more time.
You're saying that we are on this earth separate from apes, right? Already.
Yeah, I would say we were distinctly created by God. We did not evolve from apes. But my argument is not that. My argument is, if we were related to apes, we don't have enough time to genetically mutate from an ape-like creature to a human. The evolutionary biologists have said that. Nobody has solved that. Do you have a solution for that? If there's no solution for that, if this is true, and it would take too long, would you be open-minded and question macroevolution that apes evolved into people?
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
He had a fruit
You would?
earlier that basically
Because you're trying to be intellectually honest, right? Are you? Are you trying to be intellectually honest, Brenda?
the evolutionary belief is that.
And you should be. And you really should be. I mean, that's exactly the way it should be. You should question evolution if this is true. But you just, okay, so you really wouldn't. Even if this is true, you know what that tells us?
Yes.
It tells us you're not open-minded. Even when presented with the facts, even if this is true, you still wouldn't question it. That's not a benefit in your favor. That's not a good thing. That means even if the evidence disproves it, I'm going to believe it anyway. You know what that's called? Blind faith. That's what that's called, Brenda. I don't have blind faith. I have a reasonable faith. I'll let John finish, and then we'll have to let you go. You can say one more thing after this.
Brenda, if you spoke to a person and no matter what evidence you bring to them, they don't change their mind, you'll accuse them of being religious. The whole idea of atheism is the idea that you only believe in what you can prove. You only believe in evidence. And yet when you bring evidence to people and they reject it, it means that it's no longer about the evidence, it's about your presupposition. It appears that we've been so brainwashed, Brenda, that you're finding it torture to say, no, evolution cannot possibly be true. It is so engraved in us, there is no way you can get out of it. It won't do you any harm. If you don't believe that you came from an ape-like creature, you won't walk away from here less human. In fact, you walk away with more dignity, with more intrinsic value. The only reason you have value, which is more than an animal, is because you're made in God's image. If you don't walk away with that, that means you have no intrinsic value. In other words, it's just an animal, and any right or wrong is based on what any individual person thinks. The whole idea is that we're bringing you truth in order to raise your intrinsic value and to show you that God created all things exactly the way He said He did. And even if you don't want to believe that, if you are shown evidence, you should be at least scientifically sound enough to say, yes, okay. Intellectual honesty is to accept where the evidence takes you. If you bring logic and reason to a reasonable person, they should change their mind. What if you bring evidence to an unreasonable person? Even that person should change his mind. So when you bring evidence, even an unreasonable person should accept it. That means you're going beyond unreasonable. And that is not what we are supposed to be as human beings that believe in rational and logical thinking. Can we at least make you think about it, Brenda?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Give Brenda a hand.
Thank you.